Hello and welcome. I am Ellie Richardson and you are watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The United States and India have agreed on a trade deal after a phone call between President Trump and Indian Prime Minister Modi. The US will lower tariffs on Indian imports to 18%, while India agrees to reduce tariffs and non-tariff barriers on the US goods to zero and stop buying Russian oil. President Donald Trump warned that bad things could follow if Iran fails to reach a deal with the US, as pressure mounts after Tehran's January protest crackdown. Former US President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have agreed to testify in a congressional investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, days before a planned vote on holding them in contempt. The couple denied wrongdoing and said they've already shared all they know. A US federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from ending temporary protected status for more than 350,000 Haitians, halting potential deportations amid Haiti's escalating gang violence. Meanwhile, US District Judge Anna Reyes claims that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem acted with hostility towards non-white immigrants. The US Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has announced that all DHS field officers in Minneapolis will be issued body-worn cameras, a move backed by President Donald Trump as a step towards transparency, as the Justice Department also now conducts a civil rights investigation into Preeti's death. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said engagement with China makes us stronger following his visit, but stressed the UK is clear-eyed about security threats from Beijing and that protecting national security is a non-negotiable. The European Union, headed by Anna Pierce, head of the Middle East and North Africa Bilateral Instruments Unit for Syria and the Middle East, held talks with the Syrian director of the International Cooperation Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ex-Parties, as they explored ways to expand cooperation. OpenAI has explored alternatives to NVIDIA's AI chips, citing speed limits in interference tasks like coding. While NVIDIA remains dominant in training chips, the move could test its AI leadership as talks between the two companies continue. And for your top story this hour, the Kremlin says it has received no official communication from India regarding reports that New Delhi may halt purchases of Russian oil. The statement comes after US President Donald Trump commented on India's energy ties with Moscow. Kremlin officials stressed that Russia's strategic partnership with India remains extremely important and said Moscow intends to continue developing bilateral relations. Now, let's listen in to an audio statement by the Kremlin spokesperson.
Мы очень внимательно отслеживаем все новости на этот счет. Разумеется, мы очень внимательно относимся к заявлениям президента Трампа. Мы их тщательно фиксируем, анализируем. И мы с уважением относимся к двусторонним американо-индийским отношениям. Но не меньшее значение мы придаем развитию нашего продвинутого стратегического партнерства с Индией, между Россией и Индией. Для нас это самое важное, и мы намерены дальше всемирно развивать наши двусторонние отношения с Дэнни.
We are now being joined by Dr. Jajit Bhattacharya, who's an economist and policy expert, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. If India reduces or stops buying Russian oil, does that mean a real change in its foreign policy, or is it just responding to US pressure while trying to protect its interests?
Officially there has been no statement from the government of India saying that it has reduced the purchase of oils. In fact, there is being an official statement which actually says that India will continue to purchase oil from non-sanctioned countries, and Russia is not a sanctioned country for purchase of oil, and therefore it basically indicates that officially India will exercise its options to purchase oil from wherever it finds convenient. And therefore, there is no official statement from India saying that it will not purchase oil from Russia. The existing statements is actually points to the contrary, that it will continue to purchase oil from Russia and elsewhere, wherever there is no sanctions, and follow the rule-based order that governs the world.
You just touched on it, there's no official statements from India. Do you think they're staying quiet to balance relations between the US and Russia?
I'm sorry, there was a connectivity problem and I missed your question. If you could repeat it.
No, that's all right. So there hasn't been an official statement from India as of yet, as you just mentioned. But do you think they're trying to stay quiet on it to balance relations between the US and Russia?
But that has been the hallmark of India. India's from the Minister of External Affairs perspective and the Indian diplomatic perspective, India has never gone overboard or resorted to very high decibel noise. It has conducted its diplomacy in a quite statesmanly manner. That has been the hallmark with Bangladesh, with Maldives, with US, and with everybody else. And hence, India has always stayed quiet on issues which needs to be discussed behind closed doors bilaterally. India has not gone out in public on these matters. I'm sure India is discussing these issues behind closed doors, but publicly there hasn't been a statement. And as per precedents, we don't expect a statement from India on these matters.
How important is the oil trade to the India-Russia partnership? And would cutting back on energy purchases seriously damage their long-term relationship?
I'm really sorry, there seems to be a connectivity problem and I'm missing your question. If you don't mind repeating it.
No worries at all. We will come back to you in just a moment. Indian stock markets Nifty 50 and BSE Sensex are soaring up in opening trade, reacting positively to the India-US trade deal announcement by US President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. While Nifty 50 went above 25,800, BSE Sensex surged over 2,300 points. Meanwhile, US stocks finished higher on the 2nd of February. Gains were led by artificial intelligence and semiconductors stocks, while small cap shares outperform the broader market. The Russell 2000 advanced about 1%, extending its lead over the S&P 500 and Nasdaq to far in 2026. We are being joined again by Dr. Jajit, again joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us back here today, and hopefully you can hear a bit better now. Could these sort of businesses and all of this between India and the US build their relationship more and help India with the tech industry?
You know, absolutely. If you even notice some of the key confidence building measures have been continuing even while the trade talk has been going on. In fact, last year in October, India signed a critical military deal with the US. From 2000 onwards, there has been a series of deals between US and India on very, very critical coordination on the geopolitical side, specifically from the military perspective. And therefore, the US-India relationship has always been on a strong foundation. It's quite apparent that India and US are actually natural allies, and there has been a hiccup with the new administration coming in, and it's a short-term hiccup which was probably done to extract or negotiate a deal which the US administration believes is good for them. But in terms of the foundations for a US-India to move forward, both the sides have always been very positive, and there has been rapid steps that were taken from 2000 onwards. And hence, this will just be a continuation. There was a bit of a blip. If you also notice, the words from the US administration for India has not been as harsh or as intemperate as the words used for other major powers of the world, including the European powers. So that mutual respect exists and will continue. If you look at the trade deal itself, India has promised a $500 billion offtake from the US in the next 10 years, and that ensures that India and US are more entwined even from an economic perspective, and therefore there will be many touch points between US and India that will and must open up the access of technologies for both the Indian industrial ecosystem as well as for the Indian military, which is also something which is critical for us. And therefore, there will be a two-way flow of both trade and goods as well as technologies, and that's good for both India and for US.
And with this trade deal, it's been described as a win-win for both India and the US. Are the economic benefits distributed evenly between the two countries?
I think that we can comment on once we get the actual text of the deal. I don't yet see it anywhere in public. So once we look into it, then we will know whether it's evenly distributed. But given the seasoned negotiators on both the US side and the Indian side, I'm pretty confident that the benefits will definitely be evenly seeded. From an Indian perspective, there are also geopolitical aspects and geoeconomic aspects. Obviously, a trade deal is about geoeconomics, but it gets entwined into geopolitics because of the fact that if we get a better deal, then compared to our adversaries in that sense, then we will be able to get a level playing field in that sense. So, and also if you look at it from the perspective of all of those economies which are low-cost economies, India's got the best deal possible. There is a maximum cap of 18% on the tariffs, which is about 3% more than what Europe has got and what Japan has got. And obviously, India is extremely competitive. It's cost competitive, so it can compete with Europe and Japan for the US market. And it has an advantage over countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on and so forth in accessing the Indian market, in accessing the US market. And therefore, it seems to be a good deal for both from the US perspective and the Indian perspective. India is a large, fast-growing market. We are one of the largest markets in the world with the largest population. So it is in US interest that they have a free access to our market. And as for the tweet from the US president, there seems to be a zero tariff promise given by the Indian side, and therefore it clearly is a very good deal for the US also.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jagdeep Bhattacharya, for joining us here on NewsX World. Ambulances and aid trucks lined up at Egypt's Rafah border crossing with Gaza on Tuesday, moving towards the sole exit route for more than 2 million residents. The crossing had been largely shut for months during the war. Israel reopened it on Monday, allowing a limited number of Palestinians to leave as part of a US-backed plan to end the conflict. However, strict Israeli security checks slowed the process. On the first day of reopening, only 12 Palestinians entered Egypt, including 5 injured people and 7 companions, even though officials had set a higher number for crossings. It is still unclear how many people have entered Gaza as the border remains open to only a small number of pedestrians each day. We are now being joined by Saul Sadkar, who's a political commentator, joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Does the limited number of people allowed to leave Gaza reflect logistical issues or political restrictions, do you think?
Well, it's a mix of both. So on the one hand, the deal agreed is meant to allow up to 50 in a day and up to 200 or so out every day if they want to leave. Although from speaking to Israeli officials, they have no objection at all to anyone who wants to leave them. And on the contrary, it's the Egyptians who want to limit the number of people leaving rather than anyone else. But the practical level, there's no real limit on the practical number of people who can leave or come in. It's mostly a political issue.
How might the slow evacuation of patients affect trust in the US-backed ceasefire and future negotiations?
Well, the peculiar thing, we'll find out the next few weeks, is that the humanitarian exit for people who are sick and their relatives has been continuing all throughout the war, even at the darkest moments. So that never really went through Rafah anyway. It went through a different crossing via Israel and onwards to Jordan. So that really isn't relevant here. This is meant to be for actual non-ill people who just want to leave. And I expect that perhaps the first day was difficult, but over time it will ramp up. Certainly Israel is absolutely no objection to anyone that wants to leave the war zone, leaving the war zone. The reason they haven't been allowed to leave the war zone in the past is, despite Israel's insistence that they have the opportunity to, because the Egyptians didn't want to let them in. They have no at all. And my assumption is that over the next weeks and months, that very slow trickle will increase in its volume.
And could the control of Gaza's administration under the ceasefire create tensions between local authorities and international actors?
The authority that Hamas remains in control of 40% of the Gaza Strip. The Israelis hold 60% of it. In order to get from the Hamas-controlled area to Egypt, they need to cross through about 3 kilometers of Israeli IDF-controlled territory. I'm sure there are processes in place to ensure that doesn't cause any issues. Time will tell if it works out well. So far, there haven't been any issues. And in fact, over the past couple of months, many thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of Gazans have left via Israel through a similar procedure.
And do you think neighbouring countries should take a more active role in ensuring aid and medical access, or would that risk escalating tensions?
The only neighbouring country here is Egypt. The other neighbouring countries to Israel are not really party to this. Certainly Syria and Lebanon are in a worse situation than Gaza, perhaps. And Jordan has been doing their bit. And there's no reason the Israelis don't object to the people in Egypt or Jordan helping. On the contrary, they're delighted to have them participate in helping out the Gazan civilian population. It's just that everything needs to go checked, because there have been many cases in the past where weapons have been found inside bags of humanitarian aid and this kind of thing. So everything that goes into Gaza is checked carefully by Israel, and that prevents any kind of problems that you mentioned.
And do you think in the next couple of days or weeks it will be used more and it will be more of a flow on the border?
I would assume so, because we know from opinion polling of the Gazan population that the vast majority would very much like to leave Gaza, at least temporarily. The majority of the buildings in Gaza are no longer fit for human habitation, as it's been a war zone for 2.5 years, and the buildings primarily were used as weapons dumps. There were tunnels dug underneath them, and the result of the destruction of the urban environment is extraordinary. And majority Gazans are no longer living in their homes. A very large number are living in tents. And a majority, again, would very much like to be living somewhere else, at least until Gaza could be rebuilt. But the rebuilding of Gaza is at least a 10 to 20 year process. There is almost no place in the world that has been destroyed to the extent that Gaza has been, that has ever been rebuilt. So the rebuilding of Gaza will be a first in human history, more or less, and will take a very long time. And in the meantime, my guess is the Gazans, or most of them, don't want to spend a large chunk of their existence on this planet living amid rubble in tents. So my guess is yes, but we'll see. And it depends on the cooperation of Egyptians and people of goodwill around the world. There are other people, of course, who would very much like to see the Gazans remain living in the rubble and in the tents, either because they hate them or because they would rather see them used essentially as human weapons against the West and Israel than them being able to live a decent life.
Don't go too far, so we will come back to you in just a moment. Ukraine's culture minister, Tetiana Bazina, has stated that Russia has launched an overnight attack damaging part of the Motherland Monument, the iconic Soviet-era World War II memorial in Kyiv. The minister described the attack as both symbolic and cynical, striking a memorial that commemorates the struggle against aggression in the 20th century. Meanwhile, NATO chief Mark Rutte is in Kyiv for a surprise visit, just hours after Russia launched its largest drone and missile attacks so far this year. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky posted a video of the pair laying flowers at the memorial in central Kyiv to soldiers killed in the Russian invasion. Rutte has stated that the PURL program is supplying 90% of Ukraine's air defense missiles. He also added that reaching a deal to end the war will require tough choices. This comes as a second round of trilateral talks between Ukraine and Russia, and the United States is set to begin in Abu Dhabi on February the 4th. The talks are set to focus on reaching a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine and end the 4-year-long war between the two countries. We are now being joined back by Sul Sadkar. Thank you so much for joining us back here. So, not long ago, Russia released attacks on Ukraine's energy grids when it's cold, and on their own buildings where people are on trains or in hospitals, or now they're doing a war memorial. Do you think that Russia hitting all of these cultural and historical sites, how might this shape international perceptions of the conflict?
Well, it doesn't make Russia look any better than it does already. The vast majority of people that matter in the world, pretty much on all sides, have a very dim view of Russia. And that's because, whereas in the past Russia was part of a great empire who could buy friends all over the world, they no longer can. They can't afford it. And the reason they can't afford it is because of their ridiculous war in Ukraine that has wiped out 50 years of their own military buildup and made their own weapons look useless. So it's trashed their military industry. India, as you know, are looking to find other sources for their weapons because the Russians have demonstrated that the weapons that they were selling to India are worse than useless. They are simply death traps. The air defense that they sold to Iran and Venezuela completely failed. So Russia is grinding itself into the ground, both in terms of its population, its young men that it's killing, its economy, and its unity. And the end of the Ukraine war, whenever it comes, will be followed not too long after, most likely, by the breakup of the Russian Federation. When you look at it, that does seem inevitable at this point.
How should the international community respond when historic landmarks are damaged in conflict?
Well, what can they do? What can they do? Ukraine is not a part of NATO. There's a war going on between Ukraine and Russia. Russia attacked Ukraine, and the world is upset about it. But well, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? In the end, the NATO alliance and the United States are providing weapons to Ukraine, providing them finances to allow them to hold the line against Russian expansionism. And the Ukrainians are doing that as well as can be expected. And hopefully, over the next couple of years, Russia will simply run out of steam and collapse in the face of hitting up against this brick wall that is the Western economies, which outnumber them 20-1. And if that happens, eventually, we can only hope that the response that they have put up will be vindicated, which is to support Ukraine against Russia. And if it doesn't work, it's going to be much worse, because since Russia has entirely turned its economy over into a war machine, the war needs to keep going. The minute the war stops, even if the war ends with a Russian victory, new war will be required to keep the economy going. So we very much have to hope, all of us around the world have to hope that Russia is taught a lesson here in Ukraine, because not only will it deter them from further adventures of the kind, it will deter everybody else in the world. It will show to them that it no longer works. You can no longer go around the world conquering and occupying territory as if you are a 19th century empire.
Thank you so much, Saul Sadka, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Sudan's army says it has broken a long-running parliamentary siege on the city of Kudgili, the capital of South Kordofan state. Army sources told AFP that government forces entered the city on Tuesday and lifted the blockade. They spoke on condition of anonymity, saying they were not authorized to brief the media. Kudgili has been under siege by the Rapid Support Forces and allied militants amidst Sudan's brutal conflict that began in April 2023. The city has been severely affected by famine and shortages, with humanitarian access largely cut off during months of fighting. The development marks a significant shift on the grounds in Sudan's civil war, which has displaced millions and devastated large parts of the country. According to reports, OpenAI is exploring alternatives to some of NVIDIA's latest AI chips as it seeks faster hardware for specific tasks like coding and software development. While NVIDIA continues to dominate chips for training large AI models, interference, the process that allows models like ChatGPT to respond quickly, has become a new battleground. OpenAI has struck deals with companies such as AMD and Cerebras, looking for chips with embedded memory that can speed up users' interactions. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang has dismissed suggestions of tension, saying the company continues to deliver the best performance and total cost for interference. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has praised NVIDIA's AI chips, saying the company hopes to remain a long-term customer. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.